Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Ferroequinologist. Now on this channel we like to talk about everything possibly related to trains. And if you're like me and you're a rail fan, you've probably been on a heckin' lot of train rides. Like, I tried to count the number of train rides I'd been on the other day, and I couldn't even get a number, it's so many. So, about a year back, I started this series where, we go around and we look at train rides and we say, oh, well, this one's great because, this and this and this, and this one's not so good because of this. But I found a problem with this approach, which is, I can say, this ride is a solid, 8 out of 10, and it's like, well, great, but what does that mean? So what we're doing today is we're fixing that problem, where we are going to choose the all-time best train ride that I've ever been on, and what I actually believe, spoiler alert, to be pretty much the best train ride you could ever go on. I don't know how you could get better than that. And we're going to set that as our 10 out of 10, so then every time we review a train ride, we can say, well, it's less than a 10 out of 10 because of this, right? It's different than this. So then everything is compared to that, and we're reviewing it off of actually something. So then the real question then is, what train ride are we going to pick as the ultimate standard? What train ride is the best train ride that I think you could possibly go on? Because, there's a lot of good options, right? Obviously it's going to be a steam train, I think. I'm a steam train guy. If some of you probably like diesel trains as much as steam engines, and that's fine. But steam engines are where it's at for me, So it's got to be a steam train. It's got to be unique, right? I've been on plenty of just, generic steam train, goes down the line for 20 minutes and comes back, right? They're good, don't get me wrong, they're excellent, but they're not the best ever, right? So it's got to be unique, it's got to have a steam train, and there's got to be some kind of, feel about it, right, that really just makes it this fabulous experience. And here's where we get into personal preference a bit, because full disclosure, I'm a history nerd, right? So for me, the best train ride is going to be something that, most accurately, kind of takes you back in time to that era, right? So what we need then is we need something that combines all of these features. It's got to have a steam train, it's got to be unique, it's kind of got to, take you back in time, really, give you that old-time steam railroading experience, right? That's really what we're after here. And I think, and you're open to disagree with me, but I think the best you can possibly get is the Cass Scenic Railroad in West Virginia. Specifically, the Bald Knob Excursion, 4-hour Bald Knob Excursion, powered by a Shea steam locomotive to the top of Bald Knob on the Cass Scenic Railroad in West Virginia. That is, in my opinion, the pinnacle of steam train rides. It does not get any better than that. Now, I imagine, probably correctly, that most of you watching this are die-hard rail fans, right? Or at least have a fairly large interest in trains. So most of you've probably heard of the Cass Scenic Railroad, especially if you're from the east coast of the United States. But for those of you who haven't, let me just give you a brief explanation of what the Cass Scenic Railroad is. So, the Cass Scenic Railroad is located about, I believe it's around 3 hours from the Virginia border inside of the state of West Virginia. It is in the middle of nowhere. It's impossible to describe how in the middle of nowhere it is unless you've driven for 3 hours in West Virginia, in which case no explanation is necessary. There is literally nothing around except it. You are in the middle of the mountains and there's a railroad. And what it is it is a old logging line, primarily. There's two basic lines that they run on out of Cass, West Virginia, which is one line that follows an old logging grade all the way up the mountain to the top of Bald Knob, and one line that follows the Chesapeake in Ohio for a few miles down to the equally small town of Durbin. The railroad is not anymore called the Cass Scenic Railroad. That is still the, I suppose, unofficial title, but the official railroad reporting marks are for the Durbin and Greenbrier Valley Railroad, who now operates it instead of the state of West Virginia. Now, what makes this line unique is partially that it's on old logging grade. There aren't very many examples of that left. But also because it operates entirely steam locomotives. Now, by that, I don't mean all the revenue trains are steam locomotives and they keep a few diesels in reserve for if the steam engines break down. I mean, it operates entirely on steam locomotives. They own perhaps 2 or 3 diesels in Cass. All of them are tiny engines with not enough power to take any full-size train out on the road. Every single operating engine that even has the potential to be used for excursions is a steam locomotive. And the reason for that is because it operates on a logging line grade. Now, for those of you who aren't exactly familiar with logging railroads as much, let me explain why that's important. So logging railroads were built cheaply. The idea was you build the railroad in, you extract the timber, and you take the railroad up and build it somewhere else. So that's why many of them don't survive anymore, because they weren't built to last. Now, that means that instead of normally when you build a railroad, right, you build all of this lovely infrastructure, you grade everything nicely, you try and smooth out the curves, you build nice large bridges, things like that, right? You put in infrastructure to make sure that it lasts for 100, 200 years. Logging railroads were only trying to last for about maybe 10 or 20 years, if that, right? Only trying to last as long as the timber was there. So they were built cheaply and quickly. What that means is they were built with very tight curves, typically, just sort of snaking around the side of the mountains, so they didn't really have to do any grading, and also with very, very, very steep grades, that they could go right up the side of these super steep mountains. Now, when I say steep grades, if you're a railroad person, you're probably thinking, oh, that's like, a 2% grade, a 3% grade, maybe. I'm not talking about that. So, for you non-railroad people out there, typically, railroad grade is considered steeper far quicker than car grade is. The ruling grade over Rogers Pass, for example, Canadian Pacific Railroad's line through the Rockies, extremely high, extremely steep, very difficult to construct, considered a massive engineering project to this day. The ruling grade over that line through the heart of the Rocky Mountains was 2.2%. That is considered very high, and they have to put tons of power on these trains just to get them through the pass. The steepest mainline grade ever in the United States was Norfolk Southern's Saluda grade, which was 5%. It's now closed because, traffic dwindled, very expensive to maintain open, etc., etc., etc. Now, the grade on the Cass line, when it starts out at the bottom of the hill, starts out at a 4%. A few miles later, it's a 4.55. Once you hit the bottom of the first switchback, and if you don't know what a switchback is, I'll get there in a second, it's a 6.3% grade. That's 1.3% higher than the steepest mainline grade in North America. And it keeps on going. It levels back out down to a 3.6, 2.35, then it goes back to a 6.1, then a 6.7. Then, a little further up the mountain, it goes to a 7.1% grade. 7.1. That's 2% higher than the steepest mainline grade in the United States. And this grade maxes out right at the top of the hill at a whopping 9%, which is just insane. That is, do some quick math here, and you get it's 4% higher, almost double the steepest mainline grade in the United States. Now, on a highway, a 5% grade or a 9% grade are those grades that are so steep they put signs on them saying, warning, check your brakes before you go down this grade. Those are the grades that are so steep there are truck runoff lanes in case the truck fails. And those are the kind of grades we're talking about here. They're ridiculous. So the question then is, how on earth do you even get trains up the grade? And that right there is part of the magic of Cass. Because the logging railroads came up with some very inventive solutions to these problems. And they had to do largely with the type of engines they used. So a normal steam locomotive is called a rod locomotive, right? I mean, I'm sure we've all seen them, even if you're not a train fan remotely. They look like, say, this, right? This is engine number 40 at the Essex Steam Train and Riverboat in Essex, Connecticut. Now you can see that they've got these big, they're called side rods that connect all the wheels together, right? So there's a piston that comes out from the cylinder, connects to the side rods, drives the wheels like that. That's great, it's very efficient, lets you go very fast, it works well, it's not complicated, there's all kinds of reasons why it was used. The problem is that an engine built in that way does not have sufficient tractive effort. In other words, it can't grip in enough and pull enough to get a train up the kind of grades Cass has. Like, literally, it would slip and spin out on those grades. It would literally not make it up. Cass uses a different kind of engine, and it's called a geared locomotive. There were 3 different kinds of geared locomotives. The main ones were Heislers, Climaxes, and Shays. And the number 1 favorite of all of those for the railroads was the Shay. Now, Cass does roster the 2 other types. Unfortunately, I've never seen them run, so I don't have any video of them. But mainly what they use is Shays. They were the most popular engine on the logging railroads. They were what was used for basically everything. They were sort of a contractor's engine. They were fairly cheaply made, just like the railroads themselves, but they used this very unique system of cylinders all mounted on the side of the engine and then through gearing distributed to the wheels. And the way this worked meant that the Shay couldn't go very slowly, but sort of like the really low gears on your car, it made up for that speed in raw power. So a Shay can easily take that train full of tourists up the 9% grade. A rod engine would spin out and slide back down the hill. And that's part of the magic of Cass, in my opinion, because you really don't see Shays running much anymore, because they were always rarer to begin with. Everybody else wants a rod engine, right? Just because they're just more standard, right? Now, that means that Cass is very unique in many ways. It's unique because it runs Shays, which you don't see much. It's unique because of those crazy grades, which I have never heard of on another tourist railroad. And it's unique because those grades force it to use entirely steam power. Because the only thing that will make it up the Cass line is a Shay, or similar geared engine. A diesel will spin out. A rod engine will spin out. Both of them likely wouldn't even fit around the curves on the line. And so that is why Cass only runs steam engines. Because it has to. It has no other option. To the point where they always actually keep another engine fired up and running, just sitting in the yard, because if a train breaks down on the grade, they can't just fire up a diesel quick and send it up the grade to go get it. They have to send a steam engine. So there's always a spare engine kept ready in case something breaks. Now I should point out here, Cass is completely safe. I've said a lot about cheaply built engines, cheaply built track. Yes, but they maintain it to mainline railroad standards now. They take care of these engines in the track very well. Everything is as safe as riding on any other railroad here. But this is how they were originally built. They were not that safe in the beginning. They've just been modernized to make them safe and usable now. And the other thing is because Cass is in the middle of nowhere, all the repairs are done in sight. Right? Because not only is it pretty tricky to ship out parts to be repaired somewhere else, there's not even a lot of places that know how to repair a Shay anymore. So they have these huge shops, and they can do anything pretty much in these shops, short of like machine an entire new engine from scratch. And I mean, maybe they could even do that, honestly. I really wouldn't put it past them. But what that means is, unlike most tourist railroads that are basically like a modern mainline railroad that also rosters a steam engine, Cass actually runs back the same as it did 100 years ago. Because they're running solely steam engines, they're having to repair them using those techniques. And they're having to keep them running using those techniques. So this doesn't feel like some sort of replica tourist railroad. This feels like you're walking into a place 100 years back. Partially because there's nothing else around. Like, you walk into the railroad station and it's in the middle of the rebuilt company town. It's this super immersive experience that really makes you feel like you're actually taking a step back in time. And the ride itself, let me just tell you, is spectacular. It's a 4-hour train ride all the way up to the top of Bald Knob. All the way up and down. So 4 hours in total, 2 hours up, 2 hours down. It is long. But here's the thing. Is at least if you're a crazy train nerd like I am, you will not want it to end. Because it's that good. Now, if that sounds too long for you, they also offer a run to Whitaker which is about halfway up the mountain. That's only 2 hours. And that's, it's about half the price, because this is, I believe it's around $90 for the full ride up. It's half that to go just to Whitaker. But, this is a just amazing train ride. All the way up, it's the engine working super hard. All the way up, just sounds just fabulous. If you're in the car right in front of the engine, by the way, bring earplugs, because it's really loud. These are open cars, so like, I mean, here, I'll just let you hear it for yourself. This is a clip with the volume turned up. This is about how loud it actually sounds, probably a little quieter. And then when they blow the whistle, let me just put it this way. I was almost at sonic overload with earplugs in. Definitely bring earplugs, please. Protect your ears. Even if you're a couple cars back, probably bring earplugs as well. And you just get this just crazy train ride. Like, I've never had a train ride where the engine had to work that hard, that much. Just fabulous. And there's a couple cool things too. I mean, it's logging grade, so it's steeper, it's sharper curves, kind of a different feeling. There's also a couple of what's called switchbacks, which are basically the train pulls in down this length of track past a switch and then reverses up the other leg of the switch. So they can get up super steep mountains by just zigzagging back and forth. And there's actually one of those in the Cass line, which is cool. And there's other examples of this cool logging railroad kind of vibe too. Like when you get further up the mountain, your engine's burned so much fuel that it actually runs out of water about 2/3 of the way up the mountain. And they just have this, boiler sitting there that they fill up with water from a creek. They pump that into the engine and off you go and you're good again. Right, I've never been on a train ride where they had to refuel mid-ride. That just never happens. Again, that just shows you how much these engines are working. So they work super hard all the way up. It's fairly deafening, but very cool. All the way up to the top of the mountain. Then when you get up to the top of Bald Knob, there's a scenic overlook. They leave you there for about, I believe it was about half an hour for us. And you can go out and look at, it's just this fabulous view. They give you a lunch. You can eat your lunch up there if you want, or you can eat it on the train ride. And then you get back on the train, and you pretty much coast all the way down the mountain to Whitaker. Now, at Whitaker, there's a rebuilt, I guess it's a log landing. It's not an exact replica of any certain thing, but they've got, a bunch of old cool rebuilt logging buildings, rebuilt pieces of railroad logging equipment that they let you tour around for, I believe it's about half an hour. And then you get back on the train, you roll down the couple switchbacks, over a couple grade crossings, through the shops, past the burned out mill, and you're back at Cass. And it is, let me tell you, just fabulous. I mean, hopefully you're getting a sense from these video clips, but words cannot adequately describe how cool it is. To conclude, the rating for this one is obviously a solid 10 out of 10. Yes, it's long, yes, it's in the middle of nowhere, yes, it is fairly spendy for a train ride, but it's all worth it. It's so worth it. Like, if you're ever in the area and you have a free day, I cannot recommend highly enough that you go check out this line. It is just fabulous. That's really the only word I can think of to describe it. Solid 10 out of 10. Absolutely fantastic, old-time atmosphere, fantastic, well-maintained steam trains, multiple ones of them, in fact, I think like 5. Fantastic ride, just awesome trip up the mountain with the engine pounding the whole way up there and getting to watch them coast down on the way back. Awesome views out of the engine. Just loads of fun stuff to do. Like, I spent 2 days there. I could have easily spent 3. And I mean, just super unique, right? Really, I can't think of off the top of my head, although if anyone else can, please let me know in the comment section down below. Can't think of really any other train rides that are quite like this. Now, as always, if you disagree with my rating for whatever reason, please let me know in the comment section below why. If I've made any mistakes and things that I've said, again, please let me know in the comment section so I know what to fix next time. I'm sure I've made some mistakes in a video this long because, remember, I'm not an expert. I'm just someone who's read way too many books, watched way too many videos, that is probably good for me. So if you've made it to the end now, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you like this, be sure to subscribe and let me know so that I know to keep making more content like this. And yeah, thank you all and have a great day.